taxes to pay for it. Because if you do, you will most certainly lose the election. The taxpayers will not vote for candidates who promise tax increases. Now, to show you that George Bush knew the rule during his presidency, he coined a very catchy phrase. Read my lips, no new taxes. This was repeated so often by comedians and others that it became known all across the United States. But the intent was to make it well known amongst the American people. So what happened next? George Bush raised taxes in 1990. George Bush lost the election of 1992. George Bush intentionally lost the election of 1992. Because just as Bill Clinton told us, both parties are controlled by the same people. And it was not a coincidence that George Bush was also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, just like Bill Clinton. That means that the conspiracy wanted Clinton in office. He had followed the yellow brick road, and a conspiracy made him president of the United States. By the way, there was a precedent for Mr. Bush's rather dramatic action. Walter Mondale, the Democrat candidate for president in 1984, did identically the same thing in his campaign race against Ronald Reagan, the Republican candidate, in the election campaign of that year. On the night of the Democratic National Convention on July the 19th, 1984, when Mr. Mondale accepted the nomination for the presidency from the Democrat Party, Mr. Mondale broke the no taxes rule with these words. Let's tell the truth. My opponent will raise taxes, and so will I. He won't tell you. I just did. And to show you that the cartoonist had a field day with Mr. Mondale's statement, this cartoon appeared in U.S. News and World Report. Mondale is shown on his bandwagon under a banner which reads, I'll raise your taxes. He is shown saying through a megaphone, come one, come all, jump on folks, hey everybody, yoo-hoo, hello, testing. And there's no one around, no one is shown jumping on his bandwagon. And the second cartoon shows Mondale holding up what appears to be a post-election Chicago Daily Tribune newspaper with the headline reading, Mondale defeats Mondale, apparently referring to his Democratic convention speech in which he promised a tax increase. And as could be predicted by anyone who knew the rule, Mondale lost the election of 1984 intentionally. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, Walter Mondale was also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Notice that both a Republican and a Democrat presidential candidate was asked to throw his election, and both of them did by breaking the no taxes rule. So this is evidence that both political parties are controlled by the same people. That means that the conspiracy wanted Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton in office. So there you have it. Clinton's conspiracy is real. President Bill Clinton is a member of the vast left-wing conspiracy he told us with his own mouth. Now let me return to the discussion of President Bill Clinton's teacher and mentor, Dr. Carroll Quigley. To Dr. Quigley's credit, he did experience a slight change of heart about his support of this conspiracy. 4 years after his death in 1977, Quigley's new book was published. It was entitled The Anglo-American Establishment. First of all, please notice that the flag of the United States shown on the dust cover of the book is upside down. This is a universal distress sign that a nation is in trouble. So the implication of the publishers is that the United States was in trouble, apparently because of this international network. And this is part of the evidence that Dr. Quigley had some reservations with what he had discovered about the power of this network. The paragraph underneath his picture on the back cover of the book says these are the words of Professor Quigley before he passed away. No country that values its safety should allow what this network accomplished. That a small number of men would be able to wield such power in administration and politics should be given almost complete control over the publication of documents relating to their actions, should be able to exercise such influence over the avenues of information that create public opinion, and should be able to monopolize so completely the writing and the teaching of the history of their own period. Welcome aboard, Dr. Quigley. You are on the right track. However, he went on. It is not easy for an outsider to write the history of a secret group of this kind, but it should be done. For this group is one of the most important historical facts of the 20th century. But agreeing with this group on goals, I cannot agree with them on methods. In this group were persons whose lives have been a disaster to our way of life. Unfortunately, their influence has been strong, and thus ends the story of Dr. Carroll Quigley. However, let me make this observation. If Dr. Quigley was alive today and I could talk to him, I would say this. If only you had said this before, this international network you so strongly supported and had no aversion to murdered 53 million people in World War II, they might still be alive today. But I must be fair to Dr. Quigley. At least he figured it out and tried to correct his early support of this international network. He deserves the praise of freedom-loving people all over the world. But his attempt to clear the air poses a real problem for Bill Clinton. He also said that he had no aversion to this conspiracy. And while Dr. Quigley finally objected to its evil methods of wars, depressions, and revolutions, during Clinton's entire 8-year administration, he did not renounce the methods of this network. In fact, he appointed hundreds of their members, fellow members of the Council on Foreign Relations, to positions inside his administration. Please remember that President Clinton's hero, Dr. Quigley, said that these people had been a disaster to our way of life. But Bill Clinton appointed them anyway, even after Dr. Quigley made that statement that they were a disaster to our way of life. And let me not forget to mention the name of one individual who has been a disaster to our way of life: Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton's teacher, the man who guided him on the path to the presidency, later called him a disaster to our way of life. You will recall that Dr. Quigley wrote The Anglo-American Establishment in 1981, and Bill Clinton did not become president until 1993, 12 years later. He certainly could have read this book just like he read Dr. Quigley's first book, Tragedy and Hope. And ever since he has been out of office, he has done nothing to expose this conspiracy. Bill Clinton was encouraged to learn about this conspiracy. Bill Clinton went to Georgetown to be taught about this conspiracy. Bill Clinton then went to Oxford to learn more about this conspiracy. Bill Clinton joined the Council on Foreign Relations to become a part of this conspiracy. And Bill Clinton was made President of the United States because he had no aversion to this conspiracy. And then Bill Clinton did nothing to expose it nor stop it in its plans for America. This is the legacy of Bill Clinton's presidency. Men of decent morality will always regret that he did not have the conviction to expose them and their evil deeds. Yes, this conspiracy has truly become Bill Clinton's conspiracy. This will not be an easy speech to deliver because I too believed the lie. And I would like to repeat my request that you become a member of a jury and withhold your verdict about whether I am right or wrong until you hear all of the evidence. If you will do that, I believe the evidence that I will present will convince you that the claims I make will be proven correct. I used to believe that those who founded this nation were men of God, or at least they believed in a supreme being, and that they wrote perhaps the finest documents ever written by the mind of men when they wrote the Declaration of Independence and then the Constitution. But we have been lied to. Because I have found evidence that our founding fathers were part of an ancient conspiracy. And because they were, they set this nation on a course that few in America know anything about. Perhaps the greatest evidence that I am right comes from the pen of Benjamin Franklin, one of this nation's most influential founders. This is Mr. Franklin dressed in regalia, indicating that he was a member of the Masonic Lodge, commonly called the Masons. He signed both the Declaration of Independence in 1776 and the Constitution of the United States of America in 1787. Yet, as I hope to prove, he was a major conspirator. He assisted in the creation of the most oppressive document ever written by the mind of man, the Constitution of the United States of America. Now that is not the traditional view assigned to what most historians call the most liberating document ever written by the mind of man. And I am certainly aware of the implications of what I believe about the beginnings of this nation. What you are about to hear is perhaps the most revolutionary work ever written on the founding of this nation and the writing of both the Declaration and the Constitution. Because the founding fathers were conspirators, because the founding fathers were liars, because the founding fathers did not protect man's God-given unalienable rights, they took them all away. As was previously mentioned, perhaps the best example of how they accomplished this was written by Mr. Franklin himself. When he wrote his autobiography, Mr. Franklin came as close to admitting the guilt of this nation's founding fathers as it is possible to do so without directly admitting it. This is what he wrote on page 110 of his book entitled Benjamin Franklin, His Autobiography, published by P.F. Collier & Son as one of the Harvard Classics. Franklin